But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
I said listen to all of this, sir.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
I said listen to all of this, sir.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 323. What did anti-suffragettes know about women? I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson, and nonsense annihilator, Lauren Brooks, and tonight we're going to provoke the thoughts, so much we're officially declaring tonight Piss Off the Thoughts Thursday. But before we get into it, we got to do what we got to do. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice. Let's hope we never get to third-party payment platforms. That would get weird. But in any case...
Or 34th party payments. What happens if we get to Rule 34?
That would just be OnlyFans, wouldn't it? I'm not doing that. No,
that would be okay.
See my cheesy old 53-year-old ass. No.
You'd be surprised. Rule 34 means exactly that, Hannah.
Yeah, it's better if people just draw the cartoons, okay? Because then they can look the way you want them to look and not the way I look right now. Still trying to get my health in order. That may never happen. So, in any case, instead of building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. And by the way, like half the chicks on OnlyFans are AI now, from what I've been reading. So we could very well do something like that, create an AI honey badger, but I don't think it would fit in with the way that we do things, and I don't think that it would be a good idea, even if people knew it was, even if it was all in fun.
There are many AIs out there,
yeah,
and they're all programmed according to the sensibilities of certain humans. Some have been programmed to be left-wing. Most of them, let's face it, have been programmed to be absurdly left-wing. And some of them have been programmed to be right-wing. None of them have been programmed to be men's rights advocates.
Yeah.
That'll take some time.
Well, you really have to watch out, though, for is the AIs.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Aye.
And now that you've spoken it into existence,
it's gonna be a real thing.
It's all game's on, baby.
No, I would if I had money, I would support an OnlyFans account that actually admitted to being AI or artwork instead of a real person, as long as it had a storyline, right? It'd be similar to, some of the accounts that you follow that are, God, I can't think of what it's called, ARGs, alternate reality games, right? Where you're following a Twitter account or you're watching a YouTube channel that you know everything about it is fake, but you're enjoying the story. That would be fun. Like, and then just throw in that it's maybe a little X-rated. That would actually be cool. But no, there's actually dudes out there sending money to not real AI chicks for the girlfriend experience. So, there you go. Since we're going to be talking tonight about stupid women, we had to at least make it slightly equal and talk a little bit about simps, right? But to recap, since we are going to provoke the thoughts a bit, I want to go back and just sort of remind everybody where we were on this. We had started getting into the problem of the uninformed voter. Albert Nader Retro asks if I'm becoming a madam. No, but I'm old enough that people are calling me that now. Ma'am and madam instead of miss. So, there you go. It's not quite the same. Nobody pays me for that, so...
They mostly call you a man.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there's quite a few people that do that. So, yeah.
Misgendering is fine when you do it in that order. When it's a woman who doesn't hate men. Of course you can misgender them on any platform you like.
Well, the funny thing is that they think that's an insult. You're too rational and logical. You must be a man. Oh, hurt me again. I'm so upset. I just can't. I'm beside myself.
Yeah, I often get called sir by the guys that I work with every once in a while. You know what I mean? It just kind of slips out. Because I have to correct them.
Yes,
you know,
sir,
so
ma'am.
I'm in a, right. So, you know, and one of the guys, it happened twice in a row. And one guy was like, "Oh, sorry." I'm like, you know what? It's not, that's a sign of respect to me.
Yeah.
Because that means that you respect me the same way that you would a man, you know, so that I'm not just a vagina sitting in this job. I actually mean something here, and you respect me enough to treat me like you would someone who is in a position of power over you. You know, and I, you know, believe me, I do what I can do to not abuse that, because otherwise they wouldn't trust me.
Yeah, no, you'd kill that trust really fast if you did that.
Remember this, when anyone says you look like a man, or you smell like a man, or you sound like a man, you can just turn around and say, thank you. Men are beautiful too.
Exactly.
Did you know that was an option, folks?
and you know, I just really piss them off by reminding them that, well, you know, the smartest people in the world are almost entirely men. Like, there's very, very few women in the number that are the smartest people in the world. So if you're saying I'm a man, calling me smart, my opinion. But yeah, where we were last week, we had covered down to the problem of the uninformed voter, and right before mentioning that, we went over the fact that Mrs. Arthur M. Dodge, who was a huge proponent of avoiding giving women the suffrage, basically had argued that women were not just generally uninformed about politics and not yet ready for the vote, but also possessed of certain levels of social power that gave them political power that they would lose. They had significant influence over lawmakers, and they would lose that power if they entered partisan politics. And the reason that she felt they would lose that power is that they would become complacent. Without the power to vote, women were engaging in open activism, where they would go places and help people and go talk to politicians and protest and write letters. If the same women were alive today without those voting rights, they would be writing to their politicians online, they would be making phone calls, they would be showing up in Washington, they would be doing silly stunts to get the attention of politicians and sort of demonstrate in roundabout ways the points that they would be trying to make. But for the most part, their granddaughters and great-granddaughters and great-great-granddaughters did none of those things because they had voting rights. So once in a blue moon, when a politician attacks the idea of killing your baby before it's born, then they all go wandering out into the street and throw screaming temper tantrums. Or, when a politician says that women are such gold-digging clout chasers in mass, that there are many whose standards for what kind of behavior they will tolerate from a man change depending on how much money he makes and how famous he is. Or rather, if you're a star, you can grab them by the pussy and they'll let you do it. And they have a temper tantrum about that. But then when it comes to things that women claim to really care about, like their children's education, all of a sudden, you don't see so much. They're voting for politicians, and they spent the last 100 years voting for politicians and expecting results without holding them accountable. So that's sort of like right up to the problem of the uninformed voter. That was kind of what we talked about in the past couple of weeks. And I believe we read this first paragraph here where he writes that Andrew Kisar had written about the uninformed voter issue in relation to women's suffrage, in that many women really weren't very well educated, and there were already a lot of people who moved to the United States from other countries, a lot of immigration that was taking place, where people came in unable to read or unable to read English, didn't know the American voting issues or didn't know their local voting issues, and they were still voting for politicians based on things, didn't understand the importance of the vote, would trade it for goods or for liquor, for money. And so there were a lot of people at that time concerned that voting rights would destroy the country, that expanding them would make it a faster pathway to destruction. And in the midst of that, the suffragettes were offering to dump a whole population, like half of the actual population, a whole population of voters who, up until that point, it hadn't even been traditional to educate them. It hadn't been traditional for them to get involved in politics. It hadn't been traditional for them to understand what the issues were that their husbands were voting on. So, and voting used to be public. If we talked about that as well.
The idea that the general public had no power until democracy happened is utter bullshit, and this is evidence of that. Until democracy happened, the only option men had was violent revolt. And to qualify, I should say, you should not be attending any violent revolts that might be happening in anyone's country right now. I have to say that, or democracy will arrest me. But, before democracy happened, people did have some recourse. They could revolt. Because there were more of them than there were of the upper classes who were oppressing them. And for all of history, everyone knew this. Even the upper classes, like the royal family, who were in charge of everyone, they were aware of this power dynamic, that there were far more of the peasants than there were of the upper class. And if the peasants got to a situation where they were like, fuck you, they would be like, fuck you. and they would and they would revolt, and they would burn shit down, and they would cut off the head of the king. But then democracy happened, and men, well, I guess upper class men, land-owning men, were sort of told that you don't have to revolt. You can just put a mark on this piece of paper instead of revolting, and then it'll be fine. Then you'll have a voice, and we'll also send you to die in some bullshit war that none of you care about. And they went, Well, okay. And then a similar proposition was proposed to women, and they didn't have a similar reaction because they didn't have to get sent to die in some bullshit war, and the very idea of democracy didn't save the voice of the people. It kind of just diluted it. Well, we're now at the point where the peasants don't have the option of revolting, as you've seen in the UK quite recently. If you revolt, then we'll randomly make examples of you and throw you in prison to create this chilling effect on the rest of you. So, you no longer have the option of revolting. You should just focus all of your ire on this process of voting. And if you don't get what you want, then fuck you. You don't even get to revolt. We're just going to brainwash all of you with this nonsense we put on the TV. And if you don't like it, and it's worked like a charm. People have fallen for it hook, line, and sinker. They're like, we don't need to revolt because we have this democratic process where we can just go into a booth and sign a piece of paper, and if there are no options other than Communist Party, Communist Party, Communist Party, or Communist Party, then fuck you if you end up with communism. It's not our fault that we didn't include any party that wasn't communist. It's your fault, peasants. Do you hear me? The fact that you've ended up with communism is entirely your fault. It's not the result of a democratic system that's so easily usurped. It's just that the ruling class has never done anything wrong, because we totally put it entirely in your hands, peasants. And so, if anything goes wrong, it's your fault for not voting for the party that's actually going to do what you want, because that party doesn't exist. It's not our fault that there's no party that exists that actually serves your interests as the citizen of this country. None of that matters. There is no revolt anymore. There is no such dynamic between the peasants and the ruling class anymore, because we've given you this illusion of choice.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because any woman from the southern part of the United States can tell you that the most vicious of poisons is best disguised under a blanket of enforced politeness. And when you switch from the contract between the elite ruling class and the peasants being do a good job or we'll violently revolt, to do a good job or we'll politely vote you out of office, and then we want a secret ballot so that it's harder to tell if any of it, like every step of the way we've had this little, well, you can't prove that the votes were counted accurately as easily if nobody knows who voted for whom, as you can if everybody knows who voted for whom. Of course, you also can't intimidate people if everybody knows who voted for whom. But so there's a trade-off there, right? It's a safety net. We just give up a little bit of potential scrutiny in order to avoid being scrutinized ourselves. Well, then you have step by step over time developed this system wherein today it's damn near impossible to hold the system accountable and the people that run it accountable if the peasants believe that there were shenanigans with an election. And as a result, it has given the ruling class the ability to turn around and say, well, you're anti-democracy if you call shenanigans. You're anti-democracy if you suspect shenanigans. But you're only anti-democracy for suspecting shenanigans if the suspected shenanigans went our way. If they go your way and not our way, we can scream shenanigans from the high heavens, and you better shut up and let us have all the recounts and all the court battles and all the fighting over it that we want. Just don't think that you have that same right, peasants. And that's basically what we've seen happen in the last 20 years, with multiple elections being contested, and depending on whether it's the establishment having a tantrum or the peasants having a tantrum, the act of questioning the election is portrayed as either part of the democratic process or anti-democracy. And for some reason, nobody seems to have figured out that the double standard exists because the elite feel entitled to manipulate elections. That they view elections not as a means that by which the public can hold them accountable, but as a means by which they can quell the public, a pacifier. So you can't criticize us. You voted for us. Well, I didn't vote for you. Well, you were in the minority. Your community voted for us. Well, how do I know that? How dare you ask? You either be pacified or you silently stew in your own juices, because how dare you ask? But over 100 years ago, this was predicted. This kind of position that we've gotten ourselves in. And here's how. One progressive woman who shared the concern about low information voters was a journalist, Jane Grey Swisshelm, and we did read this before, who had outstanding credentials as a fearless and pioneering feminist. Swisshelm wrote in 1889 that the government was already staggering under the ballots of ignorant, irresponsible men. She strongly opposed women's suffrage and believed that if women got the vote, the government could not exist for another 10 years. And obviously what's happened is that the bureaucracy underneath the government, behind the government, around the government, has expanded exponentially. But the government itself, we learned during the Trump administration, has very little power. The bureaucracy can choke it to death. So we have created, I don't know what you would call it, a cancer within the government that is now bigger than the government, masquerades as the government, acts as the government, and when we think we're engaging with our government, we've ended up in a situation where instead we are engaging with a massive bureaucracy that is completely shot through with the bureaucratic mind virus. If you want to know what the bureaucratic mind virus is, you'll have to go through my old videos, because I think that one's still up. YouTube privated a bunch of my old videos. I've been going through and trying to find the ones that it got rid of, and I have some clue. Anything that criticized Marxism, that got targeted. So, but in any case, that's where we are now. So staggering under the ballots of ignorant, irresponsible men, she said, with that being likely, as previously stated in the article, people who were coming into the country, brand spanking new Americans that did not understand the American system yet, didn't have a full grasp of how our politics worked, but were thrown right into, as soon as they got citizenship, they could vote. Similarly, Senator Joseph E. Brown noted in 1884 that giving the women or giving the vote to all women would mean giving it to 2 million black women, 99% of whom could not read the ballot through no fault of their own. Responding to such concerns, some suffrage leaders, including Stanton, proposed not literacy teachings, not providing free education or anything like that, but instead an educational requirement for all voters. So basically, you were shit out of luck if you didn't have the education, because the environment you lived in was not conducive to you getting an education. You just didn't get to vote. Now, doesn't that sound to you guys like the suffragettes were trying to trick people into believing that they were trying to get the vote for all women when they really just wanted upper class white women to get the vote?
You mean like the Democrats are doing right now?
Yeah.
It's like the similar fucking playbook? Yeah. No, that's... Yes. God, they're so slimy.
I know. It's like, I hope nobody ever tried to pick them up, because they would have broken their skulls by accident.
Yeah, right.
Lift them up off the ground. Boom. There you go. Down on the ground. Sorry, ma'am.
Like a Looney Tunes cartoon, you know?
Yeah. That's some greasy shit right there. Oh my gosh. Other suffragists disagreed with this proposed solution. Yeah, because some of them were black. But and Stanton's own daughter, suffragist Harriet Stanton Blatch, publicly debated her on the subject. And so, just for the record, I don't like this other suffragette any better because she was still a suffragette, but I would have paid to see a mother-daughter fight about this. That would have been it would have been more fun if they'd have done it in a vat of Jello, but you take what you can get. The issue of the uninformed voter was seen as a real problem, and it led Carrie Chapman Catt to form the League of Women Voters in 1920 to educate women. So finally somebody steps up and educates women. This problem starts getting discussed in 1880s, right? And in 1920, somebody finally is like, why don't we just educate women? So that would be like if when I was in junior high and high school, this problem came up, and just when the COVID crisis hit, somebody was like, we could solve this problem by giving them an education.
Now, all right, I understand that, like, if you don't have access to the knowledge, then you can't really make an informed decision on it, right? But when it comes to voting, don't you want people who are actively curious and want to be involved in the process? This sounds like they're just shoving this down people's throats, just so they can get their way. But the fact remains is that, like, if people don't care about voting, if they don't want to vote, you can't make them. It doesn't matter how much information you give them. Well, I mean, for some people it'll work, and it should, right?
Yeah.
But you're just not going to sway everybody, especially now switching over to current, day politics. Well, and I wouldn't even say that. I was going to say that these younger kids don't really care. But in this current climate, the younger ones really do seem to care a lot more than we give them credit for.
Oh, yeah. Well, and some of the people would probably credit MTV for that, but I think a lot of it is in the fact that they're coming out of university and discovering that they have shitloads of debt and very little job prospects. And they're looking at our generation had opportunities, at least, to advance ourselves economically. We could, not all of us own homes, right? I don't. But we could have, if we planned carefully, we had the opportunity to be able to do that. Whereas if you look at millennials, they have less opportunity than Gen X had. And Zoomers are fucked. They are flat out fucked in terms of being able to achieve homeownership, based on, especially if they attended university, because now they've got hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt that is going to be counted against their ability to get their first home buyer's loan, and they're just fucked. So of course, they're going to be looking at that going, we got to get involved in this because these guys are screwing us over, and we need a say. And they're a little late because now it's really hard to tell that it even matters when you cast your vote.
Well, exactly. And on top of that, like, these people they're behind the eight ball. They care about the situations that affect them, which would be student debt. And, probably, another assortment of issues that I don't know or, can't relate to because I'm not a young person in this society right now. But you really need to understand why it is that the people who are in there and making these decisions and passing these laws that are making your life harder, you need to understand why they're there, how they got there, what the process is. It's not enough to just say, I don't like this, and I want to change it. How do I change it? Well, I'm just gonna go, put my name put my name in the hat for this guy, whatever. I think that, there's hope with the younger generations. You don't want to throw these guys out there. It is, again, and it's just going back to what I was saying before. They are interested, they're curious. So let's feed their brains, let's put our stock into those people. But you can't do that with everyone, and just, you can't make everybody fucking think or get to the same point at the same time. It doesn't work that way.
Yep. Well, and, feminism was never about giving women opportunities and giving women a chance at attaining equality. It was about using women and manipulating women. And this is just an example. I very strongly believe that the people who wanted women, people in government who wanted women to get voting rights, and that existed both in the United States and the UK at the same time. They wanted very much to give women's voting rights back in the UK. And they wanted very much to enact universal female suffrage in the U.S. And they just had to persuade women to take it. And I believe the reason they wanted that was because they knew that women are stupid. And they knew that for the illusion of security, for the illusion of economic success, for the illusion of being coddled and protected and favored, women would hand over human rights, human freedoms, civil liberties, one at a time, to an ever-growing bureaucracy that would eat them, and you'd never see them again. And what have we seen since women got voting rights? Like, during the last 100 years, what have we seen happen with women? Over and over again, women have voted for politicians that promised, a car in every garage, a television in every living room. Like, why? Women have voted for politicians that promised to punish men for behaving badly toward women. How dare you speak the misogynies? Why? Because women mistake being coddled for having power. They don't understand the difference. Yeah. And you think about it, since they've gotten voting rights, ever since they found out that this strategy could be effective, that's the cat was in the bag, or out of the bag.
You know, they wanted rights without responsibilities, and they got it. You know, they want choices without the consequences. And Jesus Christ, if men won't fall over backwards to be at their beck and call, you know what I mean? To fucking just, oh, yes, she must be protected. Oh my goodness, but she's got kids. She can't go to jail. It doesn't matter that she did this felony or pulled a gun out on somebody or threatened other people's lives. She's got kids.
Yeah.
She's a mother. She must be protected.
And the worst possible decisions that you can make in terms of how to start a family and what kind of start your children get in the world, how their development is affected, and so on, get funded by government now.
Which means taxpayers.
Yes, which means men.
Yes.
And women like Lauren, who are single women with no children, pay taxes like men. I don't pay taxes like men, but Lauren does.
And I almost wish I had a kid. Let me get a fucking child tax credit every year. Every year, I know I'm getting some money back from the government. Shit.
Even after the child tax credit, you get taxed differently as a single person than you do as a married person. Right? You pay different rates, and so there's a whole other thing. But yeah, we are, as a nation, with the money of the men and women who make the wisest financial choices, getting ripped off by government, getting ripped off by the people they voted into power, or rather the people that women voted into power. We are paying women to make stupid choices. That is the bottom line. There is no other way to explain what we're doing in terms of welfare, in terms of insurance, in terms of all of the variety of protective laws that we have in place. And it's not just paying women to make stupid choices by giving them food stamps for having kids out of wedlock. I'm talking about every women's shelter that's funded in the United States, every loan and grant and whatever else, little bits of money here and there that are given to women to go to university and study fucking underwater basket weaving with a gender studies minor. All of that funding goes to cover the cost of women who involve themselves with abusers or women who lie about being abused. And those are the only two situations that that money goes to, right? Every other type of violence that humanity engages in, men have created whole systems, not just the cops and the law and the court system and all that, but having street lamps on the street, right? Having neighborhoods where all the houses are together in this area and the businesses are together in that area, so that you're less likely to see violent crime in the residential areas unless there's drugs being sold there. All the different things, the ability to lock your doors, the ability to use public transportation to get to and from places so you're not out on the street, all of those different things that men have created to protect women from violence. The only thing left where women can claim to be the bigger victims of violence is when women go into a situation on purpose, associate themselves with somebody on purpose who turns out to be violent toward them. And either they've been a bad judge of character, or they've had the bad luck to run into a complete psychopath who can hide it. And then they don't necessarily leave right away. Right? That's it. That's the main experience of violence for women. And we've created massive funding to help women navigate a court system and a social system, a recovery system, and so on. when they do make that mistake. Getting together with the big scary guy, right? The one who is the rebel without a clue when you're in high school, and then goes on to be like completely messed up in his adulthood, and staying involved with that guy, knowing that he's the guy that's eventually going to hit back when you hit him, or hit you first, depending on whether he's in the majority or the minority of abusive relationships, is a stupid choice. Right? If I was with a guy and he hit me, that would be the end of it. I wouldn't have a second date with that guy. If I was with a guy and he made me think he might hit me in the future, that would still be the end of it. Still wouldn't have a second date with that guy. Like, when I was dating, there were times that was the reason why I didn't have a second date with a guy. Because I don't like getting hit. And I don't like that kind of conflict that leads up to it either. Not with somebody that you're trying to love, right? It's a stupid choice to cling to that. It's a stupid choice to cling to it to the degree that you actually marry it or move in with it. And it's a profoundly stupid choice to bring babies into it. And what do we do when women do that, when they make those stupid choices? We throw money at them. How do you expect to teach women not to make stupid choices if you give them prize money every time they do it? I mean, am I wrong here?
And again, that's where this Biden-Harris administration got its fucking MO from. Let's open the border and just bring countless irresponsible people in and just pay them to live. I mean, it worked so well when we did it for women. You know, now they're completely dependent on the state. Let's have more people dependent on the government. That sounds like a smart idea.
Yep. That's exactly what our first woman president will do.
Yeah. Let's pray that it's not this one. I don't know if I don't know if I can. I don't know if I would last. I think I would.
Nope.
I can't do it. I can't do it. I would be even more irate than I am right now, and I'm cursing every fucking day. You know.
I know. God, can you imagine 4 years of that laugh during every presidential speech?
No.
Every press conference that the president actually takes. You know, every event that the president is involved in, we would have to hear.
I can't make it 5 seconds through her talk. It really is like nails on a chalk.
But you know what? And I think that's why they're pulling out fucking Megan Thee Stallion and all the rappers, because they know that the people just don't want to listen to her. They can't stand hearing her. So let's pull the ass shakers out on stage. That'll distract them.
You know, I actually feel sorry for Megan Thee Stallion, because I looked at the performance that she gave at, I want to say it was the Democratic National Committee, I might be wrong, some Democrat event, right? And you could tell that, you know, she was putting her effort into it. She performed like she meant it, and for what she does, she did a good job, and nobody was into it. She had a dead audience.
Oh my God, the best was somebody caught there was like a little old white lady, like a couple of them in the back. Yeah. Of course, I think the whole crowd was probably mostly little old white ladies, but you know, she's front row and she's just standing there, and you can tell by the look on her face, she's like, I don't know.
She didn't know what to do.
What I'm doing now? Like, what do I do? I clap? Do I? It's so awkward. It's so awkward.
And honestly, that's not fair to a performer. Right, you hire you figure out what the audience is that you're hiring a performer for, and you bring in somebody that the audience is going to appreciate and support. That was mean. I'm not a fan. I don't really know that much about her career or anything, but that was mean. I wouldn't do that to somebody that I hated.
Yeah, and she's I don't pay attention to rap these days much. I just don't know. I don't care. I couldn't tell you a song that she fucking sang. I don't care. But she's got a young career, from what I understand. You know what I mean? Like a bad performance or a bad public outing, might actually harm her. But they're pulling people like fucking Stevie Wonder out here. You know what I mean? Like,
well, at least people, our age and older are into his music.
Yeah.
And it crosses all genres. Like, people who like country music are still gonna like Stevie Wonder, even though nothing that he's done is really country. It's just his music is just that good, and he is that classic.
I just don't understand how the black people, because obviously this is who they're targeting, right? Because you gotta make Kamala popular with the black people, because that'll bolster the claim that she's actually black. She's one of us. She's of Jamaican descent. That doesn't mean you're fucking black. Sorry to burst your fucking bubble. There are Chinese Jamaicans, okay? Nationality and ethnicity are two completely different fucking things. I'm sorry. Why do I have to explain this? These are grown people. We're adults, right?
They're not trying to appeal to black people. They're trying to appeal
to well-meaning white people.
Cat ladies, yes, that's right. Because Awfuls, which is a brilliant acronym that people have come up with. Affluent, white, what's F? Affluent white something urban liberal female. Affluent white female urban liberal. And because that's almost half of the population. It's pretty fucking close. Affluent white female urban liberals fucking hate white men. All right, that's where this is. And so by default, they love everything that is the opposite of white. So the Democrats aren't doing this to appeal to black people. They're doing it to appeal to all, because that's their voter base. And as long as they have that section of the population, then they're good to go. From that point, it's not difficult to get to white men for Kamala Harris, and that they're already gone. They're already captured. They'll do anything. They'll do whatever the women to do. It's Kamala and Tim Walz's job to get through to the awfuls, and the awfuls will get through to everyone. That's how it's all shaped up. Because it's a country run by awful. By Jenny Vance called them cat ladies. I much prefer the term awful. It's not just America. It's most of Europe. I mean, it's all of Western and Northern Europe, and most of the Westernized world, Canada and Australia and all this shit. We're all ruled by awfuls, and so politicians will try to appeal to awfuls by pretending to appeal to anything but white men, because awfuls love anything but white men.
Yeah. Well, and they're not necessarily unmarried or childless. These are the married women who pretty much use their sharp tongues as horsewhips and leashes to control the men in their lives. And the reason that they hate them is because they're afraid of losing that control. And they're afraid of having to put in the effort that a normal human being puts into their life and their relationships if they lose that control. It's really a pathetic way of living, but I've run into a lot of women that are like that. I mean, I would be beside myself with nervousness and worry if I had to try to control my husband. he's perfectly capable adult, and probably a good deal smarter than me about a lot of things, and it would be like trying to control Bugs Bunny as the Elmer Fudd character or the Daffy Duck character. It's just not going to happen, right? So these women thwart themselves from the beginning by trying to control people who are probably smarter than they are, or they've married down, who are definitely stronger than they are, more capable than they are in a lot of ways, and who probably don't care about half or more, maybe 99.9 repeating percent of these women's orders that they're giving them, and just are compliant to stay out of conflict, right? And that's a good deal of how awfuls control the world. You couldn't pay me to nag my husband. These women will do it for fun. They can all fuck right the hell off, though, if they want to nag my husband instead of their own.
It's a compulsion.
Yeah.
It's like people who have this compulsion to collect bugs in a jar. Like, awfuls have this compulsion to collect white men in a jar.
Well, and they don't understand relationships either. Like, when I decided I wanted to be with my husband, I decided this is a person I love the most in the world. I want to do what I can in my life to help him be happy. And he does the same thing for me. It's mutual. But there's no room for nagging in any of that, right? There's no room for bitchiness in that. There's no room for deliberate misunderstanding in that, which women do all the time in relationships. There's only room for mutual support and care and consideration, camaraderie, and some other fun things. But for some reason, it seems to be that the majority are the type that will, like I said, use their tongue as a horsewhip and a leash. Maybe they misunderstood the word bridle. But in any case, back into the article, we've gotten to the point where we understand a little bit about the problem of the uninformed voter back then, and the issue basically then is throwing voting rights at a large section of the public without acclimating that segment of the public to the history and meaning of voting rights, to the contract that they represent. Let us have this type of control over the relationship between government and the people so that we don't revolt and cut your heads off. Let's let the pen be mightier than the sword so that we don't have to use the deadlier instrument. And most people don't understand that. Most people didn't understand that. Most people don't know the history of how voting evolved out of a system wherein men backed what their government did with blood and money. And if they didn't like spending their blood and money on what the government was doing, they had to correct the government. Right? So, the next point, after the League of Women Voters seeking to educate women, all those years after the start of the heyday, I should say, of the suffragette movement in the United States, women anti-suffragettes were not so much opposed to women's rights as they were opposed to immediately granting the vote to all women. However, none of the 15 college textbook mentions that. They don't mention that the problem of the uninformed woman voter was an obstacle to women's suffrage. Right? They don't suggest that maybe the reason that women were not voting was because women didn't know anything about politics at the time, didn't understand the issues, couldn't read the ballots, The ignorant voter issue profoundly affected the campaign in another way as well. When black men were given the vote by the 14th and 15th Amendments, some educated white women were hugely insulted that illiterate lower-class men could vote while they could not. Suffragists' speeches often mentioned their resentment about being politically inferior to the lowest classes of men, including immigrants and former slaves. And a lot of that was prejudice. A lot of that was, we don't like this because of their skin color. And a lot of it was, we look down on them. But there is also the legit concern, if they can't read the ballots, they can't read the material, because there wasn't, you couldn't just turn on your computer and get online and get your computer to read you the news using a speech app. Those things didn't exist. None of that existed. You had newspapers. You had word of mouth. I don't even know if it was common at that point for people to have radios in their homes. It might have been. So we're talking a time period where there were a lot of prejudices. And there were also legitimate issues that were not addressed before expanding suffrage. Education should have been addressed immediately. Literacy should have been addressed immediately. And what those women should have done, if they had been smart at that time period, would have been to create a movement to expand literacy in the United States. Instead of complaining that there were illiterate voters, do your best to help them become literate. It's not exactly like it's damaging to people if there are more people in the world who are literate. If there are more people in the world who can make decisions based on a larger spectrum of information, that's actually a benefit to everybody. But that's not what they did, right? What did they do? Suffragist speeches often mention their resentment, like I said, allowing, quote, Patrick and Sambo and Hans and Young Tongue to make laws for educated white women added insult to injury. So those were their slurs, I guess, at the time. And of course, you can recognize two of them as minorities. Hans would be German, Dutch, and Patrick would be Irish. So they had a broad spectrum prejudice going on there. Stanton told her audiences, and she often repeated that same speech, even after abolitionist Frederick Douglass objected to the offensive term Sambo. This resentment of black and immigrant voters was a huge motivator for the suffragists, possibly even greater than their desire for political power. This is a thing with women, by the way. A woman can not care about something, not want it, not want anything to do with it, until somebody else has it. And all of a sudden, well, why does that person have it and I don't? Then it's suddenly desirable, and it's unfair that the other person got it first. That is incredibly feminine behavior. That's toxic femininity. It wasn't necessarily that the suffragists themselves felt victimized by man-made laws. They admitted as much privately at Seneca Falls. It was the principle of the thing, the symbolic equality of the ballot in women's hands. So they didn't even care how women were going to vote, right? They didn't even care if it changed their power level. It was the principle of the thing. They fucked everybody for the principle of it. not about equality. It's about nobody else can have anything I don't, even if I didn't want it. The inequality of giving blacks a vote before women. It is the Negro's hour. The women were told, deeply offended many white suffragists. Stanton and Anthony actively campaigned against giving black the vote by the 15th Amendment because women were not included, which suggests that their sympathy for racial equality was limited. But the country was...
You don't fucking say. Limited. Is a weird way of saying they fucking hated black people.
Yeah. Well, because they were men. Because the men got the vote, right? Black men got the vote. Black women didn't get the vote. So they were specifically mad that those men and not themselves had been given the vote. You know, how dare you give it to these lower class men? There weren't very many rich black people at the time.
But there were a lot of black people who were compelled to die for their country.
Yeah. And their freedom.
Black men, I should say.
Yeah. Yep. And yeah, they died for their voting rights. They fought and died for their voting rights. Women didn't. Again, women did not fight and die for their voting rights. And diving under a horse doesn't count. Suicide is not the same as being drafted or compelled to go to war. But the country was not yet ready to support women's right to vote, especially since suffragists did not have the support of a majority of women. Again, so what we're seeing here is they had their long road to suffrage, where men's road to suffrage was through proving over and over again to the elites, we will not support your leadership unless you give us a say in how you go about it, unless you consider our interests. We will not support your leadership. We will fight you to put a stop to your leadership if you do not give our interests consideration. Right? Men had to do that for centuries. Women whined. They whined about not having the vote. They whined about other people having the vote, other men from other backgrounds having the vote. But they never suggested to the elites, if you don't consider our interests, we will not support your leadership and we will fight you for it. They never did that. Instead, they badmouthed everybody, and they spent decades trying to persuade the women who didn't want the vote to go along with their bullshit. So he goes on, we can understand the suffragists' indignation to a degree, but in terms of practical politics, it made no sense to combine an unpopular cause, women's suffrage, with a marginally popular cause, black suffrage, in a single constitutional amendment. The question of whether to support a black suffrage amendment that omitted women's suffrage was another issue that separated ASA from NWSA, the two women's suffrage associations, American and National, I think is what they were. I have to remember. But the other issue here, so you had the ignorance of women voters, women who will not think before they choose. Right? Women who will not think before they put pen to paper, before they put stylus to ballot, before they push buttons on a computer now. They just want and they demand are the reason that our country is in the state that it's in now. Like, I went off about this on Tuesday when we saw legislation about how misogyny is being outlawed in the UK. And you have to really, to understand why this is such, for people who are not from the United States and don't understand why this is so offensive, why this is so ridiculous that somebody would outlaw misogyny. Misogyny is an attitude, right? It is your internal thoughts. It's not a thing that you do to somebody.
And the term is not fit for purpose because it doesn't mean what it's proposed to mean. It's supposed to mean hatred of all women. And practically no one in history can actually be reasonably charged with hating all women. Because hate is, I mean, it's a subjective term. But it's a subjective term that needs to be examined with each individual person. I mean, to what degree can you determine that any given person hates all women? Because that's how it's being described, as hating all women, not just hating a particular woman. You can hate on Lauren Boebert, you can hate on Marjorie Taylor. That's not misogyny, do you see? We're just hating individual women who have political opinions with which we disagree. But if it's a woman who has political opinions with which we agree, then if you disagree with her, then you're a misogynist.
Yeah.
That's what misogyny means. It's not someone who proclaims to hate all women. It's someone who proclaims to hate any individual woman who happens to be a communist.
Even if they went with a genuine definition and they said it's illegal to hate all women and we're only going to go after people who genuinely demonstrate that they hate all women, under what right do the elites get to tell you how to feel and what to think? Under what right do they get to tell you what attitude to have? That's just not a right. That's just not a thing that should be happening. Period. Doesn't matter whether it's misogyny, misandry, racial prejudice, religious prejudice. It doesn't matter who you hate. You govern yourself. It is over the goddamn line. Exactly as Jen Bottle says. It is absolutely 100% wrong for the public to tolerate the government claiming the power, claiming the right to tell you what you must think, how you must feel, what you must believe, what attitude you must have. Women bitch about being told to smile. Men are being told to eat shit and grin about it. If women treat them badly, if women commit crimes against them, if women steal from them, if women are complete sociopaths toward them, they are not allowed to talk back now. They are not allowed to care that that's being done to them. They're not allowed to have thoughts or feelings about how women behave toward them, about anything that women take from them, about how women manipulate government to take from them. They're not allowed to get upset about it now. Because the law says that's misogyny. And that's illegal. It is an absolute human rights violation to have a law in place that tells you the government can punish you for wrongthink.
But Hannah, men aren't human.
Yeah, oh well, and that's the thing. Women buy this shit.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked for 6 years at a convenience store, a gas station convenience store. I talked about this a bunch of times. You know, all the stories about cleaning bathrooms and using a turbo chef oven to cook sandwiches that I assembled and stuff, right? But the manager that hired me was this very down-to-earth, very common-sense woman. And she noticed a habit among shoppers at the convenience store. She said to me one day, she's like, we could put bags of shit on the table, not the table, but the cash register, on the counter by the cash register. And as long as we labeled it 99 cents, people would buy it.
Mm.
Right? And she was
Mm-hmm.
almost 100% right about that. Women would buy it. Women would impulse buy the hell out of that shit.
I was just gonna say impulse buying. That's what women. They're based. They live off of their impulses.
I saved money. It's only 99 cents. It's not that expensive shit.
Right. I save money by spending money.
Right.
That makes sense in a woman's brain.
I saved money because this was only 99 cents. Well, yeah, how much would it normally be? Well, it doesn't matter. It's a bag of shit. You bought a bag of shit. What the hell is wrong with you? I'm a woman. What are you going to do with that shit? Well, we'll put it in the backyard.
Yeah.
With all the other shit. You can keep it in the garage with all the other shit. And we can rent a storage area to keep all of our shit.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm going to go out and buy another bag tomorrow. Right? Women will do that. Is it any wonder that when the government puts out huge truckloads of bullshit for 99 cents that somebody else has to pay for, women are like, oh yeah, I want that.
Chop it up like a biscuit.
Yup. And you think about it, right? I mean, if you were a farmer, you might have use for bags of shit. If you were a gardener, you might have use for bags of shit.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people don't. Right? And it depends on what kind of shit it is too. If it's actual bullshit from real bovine creatures, then that's great. You can use it to compost and all that. But you could put bags of dog shit on the counter next to the cash register at a convenience store, and women would fucking buy it. I used to know a chick who had a gold-plated dog turd because she thought it was funny. But and I'm like, nobody's ever gonna buy. That's not gonna appreciate in value. It's a dog turd. How the hell did you gold-plate a dog turd without having it catch on fire?
Well,
I know how, but
what does it say about you? Are you like the queen of the turds now? Like, what? Why would you put that around? You know what?
Get it on display.
I
was like, on our mantle.
I have long since stopped trying to understand people anymore. I just don't. They just do weird shit. We're weird motherfuckers, and trying to find an explanation for some of the shit that we do sometimes just hurts too much. I can't do it.
Yeah, and it's really sad. But the thing is, you know, that type of attitude among women, right? Women don't actually need logic in order to give their hard-earned or their husband's hard-earned money away. You know, they will sign people up to pay for things that they would never have bought on their own, right? They will sign their family members up to do volunteering at their church or their community group of whatever choice they have that they do their social activities with. They will sign their kids up for activities that they don't want to do. You're going to play soccer. I don't want to play soccer. I want to play video games. Well, we're going to play soccer. And by that, I mean you. You are going to play soccer.
Mhm.
I'm going to sit in the stands and be obnoxious about it. And everybody's going to get a trophy. And they will do that. They will vote for you to pay taxes to fund the stupidest shit. They will vote to pay young women to make stupid choices. They will vote for politicians who promise to send their own sons to war. And then they'll be totally shocked when they're attending their son's funeral a couple of years later. How did this happen? How did I become a Gold Star mom? They will vote for politicians that are going to take away their right to influence, much less control, their child's education. And then they'll be shocked, absolutely shocked, when their boy named Stu becomes a boy named Sue.
Mhm.
And then later ends up suing because he really shouldn't have transitioned. Right? And the whole time, without ever thinking any of it through, just going on women's intuition, on their feelings and everything, the whole time, they will feel entitled to make those decisions. They will feel entitled to an equal say in their government. They will feel entitled to manipulate the people around them. And they'll get upset if you blame women. How dare you blame women? Misogyny. We need a law to stop you from feeling that way about all of the stupid shit we did. And at no point will it occur to them that if they vote in, if they support, if they write to their legislators and beg for their government to create a law that says we can tell you what to think and how to feel, and we can arrest you for disobeying our orders regarding what to think and how to feel, that'll never backfire on them. That'll never apply to them. It'll never apply in regards to other government actions. It'll never apply in regard to dissent that they might have when their government does things that they don't like. Nope, it's just going to give them more control over men. That's the way women think.
Mhm.
Because women are fucking stupid, short-sighted, manipulative, thieving, conniving, gold-digging, clout-chasing bitches. If they weren't, they would not support making misogyny illegal. They'd make fun of it. Look at that guy. That guy's a misogynist. He hates his own mother. What a dipshit. Right? But they wouldn't support giving government the power that they're giving government right now.
Correct.
It's like going into a bank, seeing a bank robber over in the corner, and handing him a gun. Yeah, you use it on the bankers, while you're wearing a shitload of expensive jewelry. You fucking dipshits. I just cannot even believe anybody is dumb enough to put their foot in it the way European women have. But unfortunately, American women aren't that much better.
Mm-mm.
So, low information voters. And it's not just literacy, is it? Because most women today, most women are literate in first world countries. Most women learn to read as little girls by the time they're 6 years old. And they still supported this dumb shit. It's pretty scary if you ask me.
Yeah.
So
That's
that was
why we say what we say. You know, when people like to, you know, glamorize the early stages of feminism. Oh, some of it was good. No, it was rotten to the core. And this is what we mean. This is just another example of what we mean.
Yep.
It must really suck to be a based woman in this day and age. Looking back on everything that's happened, and being having to conceive that society was going really, really well until women got involved, not just in the voting process, but in well, mainly in the voting process. But the trajectory of greater civilization has been an upward curve. For most of history, there have been movements that have set it back over the years. A lot of people like to think that the collapse of the Roman Empire and the rise of the Christian Empire was one of the reasons for the upward tick of progress being held back for several centuries. But I mean, if you can look at that and not compare it to what happened in the 20th century, like when women were given all of these powers, all of these rights, but none of these responsibilities. I mean, during that time, when men have been given more and more responsibilities with fewer and fewer rights, they've been like, okay, well, now we need to really knuckle down and make sure that we're living worthwhile lives that progress society. Yeah, in the last 100 years, men have invented a shitload better, such as all the developments in communication technology that have allowed us to be having. We're having, not to mention planes and televisions and combustion engines. The agricultural revolution. I mean, whatever degree to which you think these things might have been a disaster for humanity and its consequences, or whatever. I mean, I know this is difficult to get through to normies, but there was a general upward trajectory until we started giving women all of these powers, all of these rights without these responsibilities. And although people like to say, look how far things have gone downhill in the 20th century, that must be men's fault. Or how? I mean, you can say everything before the 20th century was men's fault because it was things were mostly run by men. It was mostly kings. It was mostly male emperors and stuff. And yeah, there were atrocities that happened throughout these centuries of history. But the 20th century very arguably saw some atrocities that were even worse than anything. I've just dove headfirst into a really broad category.
Well, and at least anything that we really know about the way that humans behaved. The 20th century saw technology create an ability for the worst of humanity to do the worst things on a grander scale to the larger numbers of people.
Yeah, there was always unspeakable torture.
Mm-hmm.
With the various inquisitions and whatever happened during wartime, but the idea that this has improved since we gave the steering wheel to women is, I mean, we like to think we're in command of the truth, But bear in mind, all of this has happened under the power and rubric of the government, and the ability of the government to hide the truth has dwarfed any ability that kings or emperors have ever had to disguise the truth. Because nowadays they have the ability to. Every home in the country has this box in the corner of the room that tells people what to think. It's called the TV, and this has only been a phenomenon for the last half a century, going on to the last century or so. But it was mostly rich people who were subjected to that propaganda. But in the last half century, everyone has been subjected to this to this propaganda, and it's all been during the time when women had the vote, and women were perfectly able to enter politics without any legal restrictions or anything. But people are still saying, in the current year, no less, that this shite state of affairs that we found ourselves in must be men's fault, because men were in charge of everything, literally everything, until the suffragettes came along. But that's not the case. It's never been the case. Like I said in that rant earlier, until before democracy was even a thing. People had a general idea of how to revolt against the authorities, be it a centralized authority like a king, which is nothing like as centralized as the government we have today, or a centralized authority like the local council. Was there any such thing as the local council in at any time until the late 20th century?
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I'm not. But yeah, it's
There was, and it was one of the ways that people were chosen to participate in the predecessor to the Parliament, the Common Council. That people would be sent to have Common Council with the King to inform the King of what the people were thinking in terms of his choices. And in particular, the people that were paying for them with blood and money, that being the barons. And so you had your highest level elite, you had your lower tier elites, and then you had your middle management tier elites. Kingdoms were kind of like multi-level marketing programs, and in a way. Because you basically had those different layers of elitism all the way down to a village would have a mayor and a council that would make decisions regarding local matters, things that were needed, and they would have a militia-type force. In what is now the UK, they would have been called the Feared, and it's something that we kind of briefly skipped over. I think I may have mentioned it in the span of 30 seconds, and then went on to more things that were in relation to how a king's decision making was backed by men's blood and men's money, men's earnings, and how that legitimized the Common Council system that predated the parliamentary system. But yeah, you had local government. As long as there have been cities and villages, there have been local governments and regional governments, and then you had your central government. They all, each one answered to the people above them one way or another. But yeah, and Art Force points out, this is especially true in an area with a large population, But centralized government without delegated responsibility is basically impossible. So they would basically have to pay a military to cover the entire country and enforce all the law and policy. And the king would never get to sleep, because he'd have to pay attention to everything going on everywhere all the time, and he'd be getting reports all the time, 24/7. But in any case, I think we've pretty much beaten the horse of women as low information voters to death. The thing that I wanted to get across in terms of what was predicted here, and the way that the prejudices worked into it, and the way that women's attitudes at the time worked into it versus today, is, first of all, back then, women got what they wanted by whining without offering any solutions to the problems they were whining about, other than give us something for nothing, basically. And that was how women's voting started. Not let us participate in fixing the problems that come up in the nation, but we're going to whine about problems that we feel affect us, and we want you to give us something for nothing, and that's the solution to those problems. Not increasing literacy, not helping people, not bringing about any kind of change that would actually address those problems directly. Nope, just give us something for nothing because of this. And that has been the trend throughout women's voting history, and even an increase in literacy, even in as the problems that they were whining about naturally worked themselves out over the course of the next century's history. Modern women are still doing the same thing. I want, gimme, gimme, gimme. Right? They are the bank robbers. Put the money in the bag, or else I'll cry misogyny. It's worse than holding a gun on somebody. And I don't say that lightly.
Pulling someone else's gun on somebody.
Yeah, it's holding a whole bunch of guns on somebody. NovaFan21 gives us $1 in a Rumble rant and says, if you haven't already, will you be able to do a video debunking the left's fear-mongering on the religious right? I keep hearing it as if it can destroy America instantly, but it never happens. I might have to get into that one time. It's... Both sides use the other side as a boogeyman, right? The wrong thing boogeyman. We've been doing the wrong thing boogie for a century as well. And it's not sides that are destroying America. It's the number of people that end up unified in agreement that it's okay to override the human rights of some people for the benefit of others. Getting a large segment of the population to agree to that, regardless of why they're agreeing to it, is what's going to destroy the country. And it doesn't matter whether they're the religious right, or the communist left, or the Greens, or this group or that group, white supremacists, black supremacists. I don't care. If you get a group of people to agree that their interests legitimize the act of overriding any other group's human rights for any reason, that is what is going to destroy the country.
The founding fathers of America did everything they could to prevent this from happening. But they couldn't have predicted what would happen 250 years later. Or I guess 200 years later. Because even the founding fathers didn't envisage what could happen if if you gave women all the rights and none of the responsibilities, it didn't occur to them that could even be a thing.
Yeah.
That's the slow march through the institutions. That's how it happened. They slowly, ever so slowly, pushed the Overton window from the point that anyone would recognize as common sense to the point that only an intellectual could possibly call common sense.
You know, at this point, I don't even know if giving women the responsibilities is going to solve problems. It'll be fair, right? If women have to register for the draft, and women have to pay taxes on the same scale as men, in the same amount as men, if you take away the difference between head of household and the rest of the household earners and all that, like, it'd be fair, but I don't know if it would change women's voting habits. I don't know if it would change women's attitudes. I think that the entitlement is so ingrained that it's going to take a few generations of women pushing back. Like, we're going to have to do exactly what the suffragists did. We're going to have to spend, 70 years or so talking women into taking some responsibility for their own asinine choices. That's going to be a long row and a hard one to hoe. And it's all going to be done by hand. Because there isn't anybody going to lend us a horse for that. There isn't anybody that's going to lend us a machine for that. In fact, we're probably going to get in trouble for it every step of the way.
Ho's mad. Ho's always going to be mad. It's
Yep.
just one of those factors of life. You get death, taxes, and hoes being mad.
Yeah, the problem is more and more women today are deciding to be hoes. That's sad.
Mad ones, no less.
Yep, and they're mad. They're mad as hell. But they don't know how to not take it anymore, so they're going to demand that you shield them from it. So we got 2 super chows. Miss Anna Vart gave us $10 and said, out of curiosity, I purchased... Oh, this is an older one from yesterday, but it's kind of cool. Out of curiosity, she says, I purchased and read The Princess at the Window. This is a book that Allison recommends, by the way. Reading about feminism from the late 70s to the early 90s was fascinating, shocking, and eye-opening. Thanks so much for introducing me to the book. And then today we got a super chow from Meredith G, who gave us $5 and said, honey for the badgers. Just wanted to get caught up on those. And it is, I can't believe it's 8:41 already. So we might cut off here and start, I think, next time, because I don't want to get into this whole, there's a lot here, of women having more power without the vote. We've touched on that a little bit, but next week we're going to molest it. So there you go. It's just so frustrating, though. I
am not going to molest anyone. Please do not arrest me, Keir Starmer.
Yes, do not arrest Mike. You have to extradite the American. And good luck with that. Me molesting history. In any case, it is very frustrating. You had talked about, Mike, how it must be rough being a based woman in one. I don't know if I'd call myself based or not, but to be able to see what women are doing and what damage it is causing within society, what they are handing to authoritarians, and what future that creates for the whole public, men, women, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren who haven't even been born yet, right? It's worse than watching somebody drive full speed toward a wall, knowing they're going to hit it and kill themselves and not be able to do anything about it. Like, not, you can scream, you can, and it's like having them be able to hear you, right? You're on the phone with them, you got a speaker in their car, you're yelling at them to hit the brake, and they're telling you there's no wall there. You're just misogynist for thinking there's a wall. And you know they're going to hit it, and you know that they're going to flatten the front end of their car and smash their teeth through the back of their head, and you can't stop them. They get to make their own decisions. But the worst part of it is that every brick that they hit in that wall is going to go outward and hit other people. And they're not just going to damage themselves, they're going to damage all of society.
Well, they're dragging the rest of society by the back of the car by a tether.
Yep. And I don't know. I don't know how I haven't pulled all my hair out. You know, it's just frustrating as hell. Like, how can you not recognize what you are handing over to authoritarians for ego purposes? Yes, it feels important to be able to accuse people of misogyny and get something done to them for disagreeing with you. You feel important, you know, and I don't know, pampered, I guess. Whatever, coddled. I don't know how normal women feel about that. It's scary to me.
What even is a normal woman anymore?
Life? Well,
because I like to think of you two women,
normal.
but then I look across the aisle at what's happening at the DNC, and they're going to bring in full-on communism so that they can kill babies. Most of them, it's a one-issue thing. They're so passionate about killing babies that they're going to bring in full-on communism in order to bring it about. If I was a woman looking at this, I'd think, good God, everything was going so well until they allowed women to vote. and yeah, I can point to other things as maybe the cause of all the shit that's gone wrong in the last 100 years. But at the same time, I'm like, maybe it's not a coincidence. Maybe the closer we draw the average woman into the bosom of democratic government, the worse everything gets. Which says a lot about democracy, but also says a lot about women. Like, between the two of them, between women and democracy, we found ourselves here. And I don't know how conscience about her can go on saying, yeah, democracy's great and women are great. Because, I mean, that premise is what's been driving us for the last 100 years. Like, and it, and people will say, oh, look what men have done to us the last, checks notes, 100 years. That must have been because of men. You know, ever since we gave women the vote, everything that's gone wrong is not women's fault. We keep saying that we need feminism because of the vote. Well, y'all have had the vote for 100 years. In what way has society improved? We have iPhones now. Okay, is that because women have the vote? I don't think it is. I think it probably would have happened if women didn't have the vote. I think people being thrown in prison for complaining about Muslims wouldn't have happened if women. Sorry, I've gone off on a tangent here. But
the thing is, you know, you have hit on something. I don't necessarily know that democracy is the problem. Right? We have put the use of it in the hands of people who do not have to take any responsibility for how they use it. People are debating in the United States whether or not the right to bear arms should continue to exist on the basis of the actions of people who use guns without taking responsibility for the consequences of their use. And guns individually affect a limited number of people at a time, whereas your vote affects the entire country. And depending on the actions of the government of a powerful country, potentially the entire world. And I don't think any women in the United States walk into a polling booth knowing that the voting stylus that they are wielding when they click that button on a computer, or when they punch that stylus if they do paper voting, which it's still allowed in some places. I don't think they're thinking of it as a thing that they are doing right in the moment to every person in the world. Like, I'm making a decision right now when I decide who I want to lead the government and which people I want to put into government to support them, that will affect how the military is used in a country that makes war at the drop of a hat. You should have to hear that on your way in. Should be on the loudspeaker as you go into the polling booth. Don't forget, your vote carries more weight than an atomic bomb, because you're putting into office an individual who can control hundreds of them. Like, just saying that, maybe it might wake up a few bitches. If the fact that their own sons could get sent to war doesn't wake them up, maybe that might make them consider something. Who knows? But then again, the women of the UK took the nuclear option, didn't they? We're going to give government control over everybody's thoughts in the names of our own egos. I still can't get over that. I'm never going to get over that. That is the most profoundly stupid thing that I have seen women support since women protested for the right to kill their own babies.
Nobody should have the vote. I'm going to say it here and again. Everyone's talking about the 19th Amendment like maybe women shouldn't have the vote. Nobody should have the vote.
Maybe nobody should have the vote.
Idea was fucking stupid in the first place.
But all this shit didn't happen until it was handed over to women, right?
Yeah. That was an inevitability of the trajectory of democracy. Everyone should have the vote. Not just starting with the most powerful men and women, but continuing with the middle class and going on to the working class. And it's apocryphally attributed to Winston Churchill that the problem with democracy you can notice if you ask the average voter their opinion. And it's never more true than when you're presented with the opinion of the average woman. And Winston Churchill was very opposed to the female vote, by the way, because he's been around for that long. And I think that was one of the reasons he was voted out shortly after the war. That and the National Health thing. That even if you're a war hero, even if you saved your country, saved your continent from the Nazis, people will still turn around and say, fuck you, because you don't want women to vote in the NHS.
Yeah.
And indeed to control the entire broadcast media industry. And it's 100 years later of women being in charge of the sentiment of gynocentrism being in charge of the broadcast media. And yeah, a shitload of things have gone wrong. but it's remarkably difficult to get it through to the general population that maybe this is at least partially women's fault. What with them having not just what they had before the vote, but what they've had after the vote. They've always had this ability to exact political change, and giving them the vote has only extended this ability. And yeah, like I say, it's difficult to get through to people that maybe the agent of change that has made shit so, dare I say, awful in the last 100 years is because of all these rights without responsibilities that were given to women. But it's difficult to get this through to the average normie because the average normie listens to government propaganda, namely the TV and the press and all this. And we would have been able to get through these barriers were it not for this this nationwide, nay, globalist-wide network of media outlets who have, for whatever reason, ever since then, gone along with the idea that women are goddesses and men are these demonic animals who just run around doing their bidding.
You know, I think the sentiment is older than people think.
Oh,
and
God,
I think the effect of that sentiment is older than people think in terms of authorities exploiting the idea that men are bad by nature and women are society's better angels somehow. And it's predictable. It was completely predictable that women would go the route that they've gone and end up where they are now, just based on the fact that in the United States, prior to women having any voting rights as a nation, because you had women in some states did have voting rights, but as a nation, like across the board, it wasn't federalized, right? So prior to the federalization of women's voting rights, the Women's Christian Temperance Union persuaded Congress and the people of the United States to enact not just a law, but an amendment to the Constitution, taking away people's right to choose whether or not they would consume alcohol, leading to the creation of the first big organized crime conglomerate in the country. They pretty much fueled the creation of 19th century women, by the way. That's what we're talking about. Pretty much fueled the creation of organized crime in the United States by getting temperance codified into the Constitution. And it was so bad that it had to be repealed. Another amendment had to be passed to repeal it. And they couldn't even vote when they did that. That made it entirely predictable that women would do what they did today. They were that short-sighted back then, and they only got worse over time. Whew. This is tiring. It's sad. And you know, Art Force says never try to separate men from their booze. The dumb thing about it is it wasn't just men. Women like booze. You know, like before I got bad news about my genetics and how it affects my kidney health, I liked drinking. You know, I still like it, I just can't do it now, or it's not a good idea for me, so I have stopped. But lots of women drank back then. The Roaring '20s was awash with alcohol, bathtub gin, speakeasies. It wasn't just men in those places. It wasn't just men involved. Bootlegging was mostly men, right? That had a profound effect on men. The creation of that whole organized crime system. A lot of men ended up on the wrong side of the law as they're living because of that. Terrible consequences for men. But not so much for women. Women still got their alcohol. Right? Men died for it. Women partied with it. So, and that's our history in a nutshell. Men died for it, women partied with it. And there's your quote mine, trolls. You can just say I said that about anything, and it'd probably be true. And yeah, dangerous activities, as Art Force says, were basically always exclusively men, and as Midnight Motorcyclist says, women pushed for prohibition and claimed alcohol caused men to beat them or be delinquents. But alcoholics can be women too. So, difference is when a woman is an alcoholic, she gets portrayed as a victim in need of help. But when a man is an alcoholic, he gets portrayed as a big brute that's going to go home and beat his wife. And so, but with that, I think we've had enough of a dose of this. I have something lighthearted for the after show. I'll let you see the front or the first few of them. So my algorithm for YouTube that recommends videos for me to watch is weird, because I watch this weird mix of, like, I look up things that feminists are saying and talking about, right? And then I also watch a lot of creepypasta readers. So I'll go to sleep to creepypasta readers. I have a lot of cat videos, because sometimes you get into dark and angry stuff that I'm researching and learning about. I gotta have something to get the old serotonin back, right? And then there's a bunch of other stuff, like some of the junk science stuff, some of the different nonsense things that are on YouTube. So the algorithm doesn't really know what to recommend for me. So I get this set of shorts from this lady who she's reading one thing from this list for each of her shorts. And I'm like, this has to be from the dumbest article ever written. Turns out it's hers. And it was really weird. I couldn't just go to a website and read the article. I had to subscribe to a newsletter and then download it. Download the PDF, which was really bizarre. So we're gonna read this tonight, or at least we're gonna start this tonight in the after show. So anybody wants to join us in the after show, if you're not already a patron, you can go to feedthebadger.com. Lots of different options. I think just being able to get into the patron-only after shows is something like $5. So it's not even expensive. It's just we need the support. So this is going to be fun and interesting. It'll definitely be more fun and interesting than well, maybe not more interesting, but more fun than reading about the history of women's suffrage. So definitely not as dry, because I'm going to make fun of this so bad. And with that, I will thank y'all for listening. I know this history is really dry, and I keep beating a dead horse. I keep repeating myself about this. You have no idea how frustrated. I'm sure you guys have every idea how frustrated I am with women right now. You're probably 10 times as frustrated, because you've been seeing it the whole time, right? Women's history is moist. Mangaka92 says, not as dry as women's history, much more moist. But let's see, are there more Super Chows? Yeah, I read the Super Chows. If there is one that I missed, it's because it hasn't come through yet. So hopefully Sierra de Flora there's not one that I missed. But yeah, and I didn't see any super chats the whole time, so I might have missed one if we had one. I'm scrolling back and looking. Oh, we did. Okay. Albert Nader Retro gave us $5 and said, in the words of Johnny Lawrence from Cobra Kai, manliness is next to godliness. If you aren't watching it, you gotta start watching it. That makes me think of something I just had to explain on Twitter. Some preacher... That's a bad way to start it, right? Some preacher pointed out that right-wing Christian men are the defenders of women that the left claims to be, but has never been. And I had to point out, like, women are not angels. And the gynocentrism that has overtaken the church is not a good thing. In fact, it's really not a good thing. And if you look through the guidebook for your religion, right? You look through the Bible, there are examples over and over again of both good and bad forms of greatness between both sexes, men and women, who can be, greatly generous. They have great generosity, great kindness, great intelligence and wisdom, great morality. And at the same time, both men and women can be possessed of great evil, can be possessed of great selfishness, great cruelty, great harmfulness, great stupidity, foolishness. It goes both ways, and it goes across both sexes. Gynocentrism is not a godly lifestyle. Women are not angels. But unfortunately, we're seeing in the Christian church a lot of almost worship of women that really should stop. Gotta treat women like human beings, because they are. And if you can't...
Well, I mean, they do a good job at trying.
Yeah.
A lot of them they really miss the mark. I mean, obviously, human beings, yes, whatever. But, just when it comes to, like, compassion for other people, things like that, a lot of women just don't possess it naturally.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I'll put it this way. In the church that I was raised in was a little different in terms of how, like, a lot of people talk about the salvation aspect of it. Like, you make this deal with God, and you can sin all you want, but you're saved, so it's okay. Well, that's not how it works. That's not how it's supposed to work, anyway. It's an accountability covenant. You are promising to do better, to strive to do better, to govern yourself to do better, and you have the promise from God that because of the sacrifice that Christ represented, that you will always have a guide, you will always have forgiveness when you screw up, and you will always have that encouragement to go back and keep doing better. That it's not, you've ruined your slate with one mistake and you might as well not try to ever do better. Each time you realize that you've messed up, you have the opportunity to learn from it and do better, because your slate has not been ruined. And it's a totally different outlook than, well, you can just sin all you want because you're saved. It's being saved makes you responsible for striving to elevate yourself away from sin. And sin is basically various forms of vanity and selfishness. You know, pretty much anything that's harmful toward other people, right? So if you take that accountability away from women by being gynocentric in your church, then you are denying women equal salvation. Which isn't very gynocentric, if you ask me. It's almost misogynistic. Don't subject women to the soft sexism of low expectations. Hold them equally accountable. And with that, I'm going to call it a night. So,
you're clearly a man, Hannah. From what I can hear, you're clearly a man who hates women.
Thank you very much.
I've never heard the name Hannah before. As far as I'm concerned, you're some kind of Celtic misogynist patriarch. Oh wait, Hebrew misogynist patriarch, because Hannah is a Hebrew name.
Yes, it is. It's Arabic.
So is my name.
Yep.
So if anyone rude words to say to me, Michael or Hannah, then you're all anti-Semitic.
There we go.
And we'll get you arrested. So do your worst. Come at me, bro.
Yep. And thanks everybody for listening. Thanks to my two co-hosts for sticking out the long sausage with me. And good night all. Thanks to everybody who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. And good night all.
Word.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.